Meeting.
Good deal. All right, Rich, can you hear me?
Yes, indeed.
Right on. Well, it's 1 minute past, so let's go ahead and get started. Just first and foremost, I'd like to thank everybody for joining this virtual roundtable. By way of introduction, my name's Eric Gregg. I'm the Director of Sales at TX Systems. And if you're unfamiliar, TX Systems is a value-added distributor of HID Global. We're trained and certified to implement, install, configure, counsel customers, and support all of HID's identity and access management solutions. So we'll get into those a little bit, a bit later in the discussion. But we work with and we sell solutions via reseller partners like GHA Technologies. I'm sure a lot of you on the call are familiar with GHA, or you got the invite for this roundtable via one of your GHA sales reps. So specifically, I'd like to thank the GHA team for helping us put this together, and a special shout out to Valerie, who's been incredibly helpful getting this off the ground. So for my part, I'll be really brief here, but the idea today is just to try something new. We want to take more of a unique approach to what would be a typical technology webinar and make this more of a discussion. More so hear from you as well as having us just talk at you. But today we'll be hearing from subject matter experts on the topic of the journey from on-prem Active Directory to Entra ID. In a moment, I'm going to pass the mic over to David from Microsoft and then Eric Williams at HID Global, who will each give you a short overview of their perspective on the migration pathway from on-prem Active Directory to cloud Active Directory Entra ID, as it's called. So then after Eric and David kind of do their short overviews, we'd like to take the back half of the call and open it up. We have a lot of end users on the line here, and we really want to hear from you all. Where are you in this process? Some of the things that would be good to know is, what is your current domain configuration? Are you on-prem, hybrid, Entra ID? If you are on-prem, are you planning to move to Entra ID? Is this migration a priority for you? Stuff like that. And as we're sharing war stories here, we'd like to hear any challenges you've come across, any pitfalls, or even advice if you found out a good way to do something or a workflow that's worked for your organization. I know a lot of other end users here would probably benefit from that. All righty. And then kind of finally, at least from where we're sitting, HID Global and TX Systems and GHA, we focus primarily on authentication. So how end users are going to be accessing your domain. So as we talk about this migration from on-prem to Entra ID, we'll be asking, and hopefully you can share, what is your strategy for getting users to log into your domain? Are you going to still leverage username and password, or are you looking to do something like passkeys, FIDO 2 credentials, biometrics, a whole host of other things, authentication apps? So as we roll forward here, we'll probably talk a little bit about accessing your domain, whether it is on-prem or Entra ID or hybrid. So without further ado, I'd like to pass it over to David from Microsoft, who can give his perspective on this journey.
All right, thanks, Eric. Yeah, I'm Dave Branscombe from Microsoft. I'm a global partner solutions architect. Obviously, most of us here on the call know that Active Directory has kind of been the backbone, the workhorse of enterprise IT organizations for over 20 years now, going on 26 years. Some of us, as you can see by my gray hair, I include myself in this group. We cut our teeth on things like Windows NT4 to Windows 2000 AD upgrades, I did a couple Novell to Active Directory upgrades. Believe it or not, I actually did an AS400 to Active Directory transition one time. And at the time, Active Directory was the cool, shiny thing. It was the new hotness, right? But Active Directory was built for a world where you had on-premises servers and you had a trusted internal network. The reality today is pretty different. A lot of our workforce is maybe remote. We have applications that are residing in the cloud, like Microsoft 365, Exchange Online, things like that. And the biggest driver here that for this discussion is that attackers target identity every single time. So Microsoft's position is very clear. We view hybrid identity, where you have some aspects of your identity on premises and some aspects of your identity in the cloud, as a transition state. It is not intended to be a destination. So the long-term strategy is to move customers from their legacy on-premises Active Directory domains into Microsoft Entra ID as the authoritative identity platform. So let's talk for just a few minutes about why Microsoft is promoting this change, what that strategy looks like, and maybe just a couple points on how we can actually make it real. So we can go to the next slide and talk about the first reason, and as it should be, security is the top of mind. Going back to on-premises AD relies on Kerberos and NTLM as the authentication protocols. Those protocols are now decades old, and they are heavily abused by attackers. So if you think about things like pass the hash, golden ticket attacks, they remain as some of the most common entry points for attackers because the protocols, the way that they're designed, can't adapt to be protected against those types of attacks. On the other hand, Entra ID was built with the whole concept of zero trust baked in, you might say. Every login that you issue through Entra is going to get evaluated in real time with conditional access and things like the compliance of the device that you're logging in from, the risk of the user who's logging in, the location of the user. All those things factor into the decision of whether they get authenticated and what they get authorized to access. Included in that is identity protection. So with identity protection in Entra, if credentials for a user are compromised, that gets flagged automatically. That type of thing is intelligence that on-premises Active Directory just doesn't have. And so you're improving your security just by going to Entra ID for that reason alone. So as I mentioned, Microsoft's strategy long-term is to move customers off of those legacy protocols and legacy ways of managing identity and into a modern cloud-driven authentication using things like FIDO, temporary access passes, risk-based MFA. It's not just because it's more secure, it's because it also helps to future-proof your identity, because the cloud is able to adapt much more quickly to changes in the identity landscape. And we see that happening on a pretty regular basis. The second reason is operational simplicity. So running Active Directory means that you have to maintain your domain controllers, you have to patch them, you have to secure them, you have to handle replication issues. I don't know how many evenings and weekends I spent back in the early 2000s managing replication issues, planning disaster recovery. So, and if you're in a hybrid configuration where, again, you have some domain controllers on-prem and you have Entra in the cloud, you have that interim piece. You have your Entra ID Connect server. Maybe you've got ADFS servers still. Each one of those is a potential failure point, and they are prime targets for attackers, especially ADFS. So with Entra ID, if you move entirely to Entra ID, you're removing that complexity. Microsoft is operating Entra as a global identity service. We handle the redundancy. We make sure that updates are pushed automatically to the entire service. And that means customers don't have to refresh domain controller hardware. They don't have to spend their weekends and nights troubleshooting replication. So again, Microsoft's view is the hybrid configuration is a phase. It is a temporary phase. Entra ID Connect should be temporary. The goal should be to consolidate all your identities in Entra ID so you don't have these two identity systems that you have to run and secure. Let's go on to the third reason. And this has to do with modernizing not just your authentication, but also the device management of your environment itself. So when we talk to customers about moving to Entra, there's a common concern that kind of bubbles up very often, and that is, how do I move my management tooling for my devices to Entra? So maybe a customer has spent years managing those devices using group policy, and they've been working with domain joined devices. So to make the transition to Entra a little more easy, a couple recommendations to think about are, if you have new devices, join them directly to Entra ID. Right? Start them off in the cloud. If you have existing devices that are joined to your domain, your Active Directory domain, transition that to use hybrid join as a stepping stone to get them to the cloud, and then move them toward full Entra ID join over time. As far as how you manage those devices, right? You've got all these GPOs that control which applications and features are available on the laptops and desktops. We can transition those GPOs to Intune configuration profiles and security baselines. And there's scripts and ways that you can automatically convert those GPOs into, so Microsoft refers to this as modern management. It doesn't happen overnight, but the earlier you get this started, the more time you give yourself to address potential blockers. So strategically, the goal is for these domain functions, things like device join, enforcement of policy, configuration of your security baselines. We want that to live natively in Entra ID rather than managing it through your on-premises servers. Now, the last area is what we might classify as compliance and future readiness. Now, not everyone is operating in a regulated industry. You know that regulators are becoming increasingly prescriptive and very specific about how identity is managed. So you might see requirements around things like phishing resistant MFA. They might say that your audit logs have to be immutable. And things like long-term retention, that's pretty standard for many regulations and compliance standards. Entra ID has those already built in. Audit logs can be streamed directly into something like Sentinel or Azure Monitor. If you're using Purview, we can have compliance reports generated that map to standards like ISO and FedRAMP and GDPR. Passwordless authentication, it aligns with things like executive orders, like the U.S. federal mandate for passwordless authentication. So on-premises Active Directory just can't evolve that way. So to get some of those capabilities that I just mentioned, you have to layer in additional third-party tools, and that creates complexity. And you've probably heard the expression many times, complexity is the enemy of security. So we don't want to add complexity to the environment where it doesn't need to be. So Microsoft's investing very heavily in Entra so that we can keep pace with or even get ahead of some of these compliance expectations. And we're even working towards addressing future challenges, things like quantum safe cryptography. So customers who stay tied to on-premises AD, they're going to find it harder and harder to adjust to meet those requirements and stay ahead of any new security risks. So from a tips and strategy standpoint, what do we recommend moving forward? First of all, assess your dependencies, inventory your apps, your GPOs that are tied to Active Directory, start adopting cloud authentication, get off of ADFS if you're on it, start relying on Microsoft Entra ID for cloud authentication, start moving your device join, like I mentioned, default to joining devices to the cloud and move your on-premises domain join devices to a hybrid join state. And at some point, you're going to want to entirely decommission that on-prem infrastructure. So retire Entra ID Connect, retire domain controllers once the dependencies upon them are gone. Keep in mind, too, that there is a service called Entra Domain Services, and that is available for if you have legacy apps that still depend on things like LDAP or Kerberos. But even in that case, I'm going to go back to the thing I've said a couple times already. Microsoft views this as a bridge. It's not the end state. So hybrid is temporary. Your end state vision should be a cloud native environment with Entra ID as the control plane that's managing all your identities, whether those identities are your users, devices, workloads, whatever it is. So it's not just about shutting down old servers. It's converting your identities so that it aligns better with the zero trust principles. You're simplifying your operations. You're preparing for compliance requirements and future threats. So organizations that are able to embrace Entra ID fully, they're going to be better protected. They're going to be easier to operate, and they're better positioned for whatever comes next down the line. So that's Microsoft's view of things. I'll hand it over to Eric, and he can talk a little bit more from, I believe, the HID perspective. Is that correct?
Is correct. And thank you, David. That was so. Let me frame things a little bit. My name is Dave for about a day. So far you've heard from Eric Gregg, and he is our channel partner at TX Systems, and you heard from David, who obviously Microsoft is a actual solution provider. So I'm going to talk to you about a couple of problems, and then so there's a couple of problems that exist when it comes to security. Biggie is password, and then with physical access. The password problem, I think everyone knows, passwords are a major issue. Everyone's trying to get away from them. They can be weak, they can be stolen, they can be reused, which is a big problem. You may have your identity, let's say at a bank, and with a strong password for friction. There's always a struggle to balance password security with convenience. You can enforce a strong 32-character password, but FIDO 2 standards is a great replacement for passwords and other weak authentication methods using cryptographic keys. The login is very user-friendly. Generally, it's backed by a PIN or biometrics. It also compares for infrastructure or wherever your identity or Okta or whoever it does offload a lot of. There is trust between authenticator and the service. Deployment is simplified. We're going to talk a little bit about deployment in a minute. Generally, FIDO deployment or FIDO. So there's also a physical access problem, but they're all 30 years old and can be easily cloned. They're all susceptible to attacks, the ones that I have listed here. May be exploited in the real world. You can go on to Flipper's website and go to a Lowe's or a Home Depot, tap your fob on the reader, but that fob can be an access control card as well, running and they will duplicate it for you. Someone very unskilled. The best way forward? Well, there's our modern protocols. I'll call out specifically CIAS and MindFair does know those, but reach out to us and we can cut physical access into being a cybersecurity company. So support diversified AES keys. What does that mean? Well, it just means that there's encryption at rest and also in transit. So resistant to cloning and skimming and replay attacks. And in fact, they raise your assurance level from easy to copy to cryptographic. So let's talk about the password solution a little bit more. And I want to talk about FIDO specifically because when in actual practice, we tend to talk about there's either device-bound passkeys or sync passkeys. And sync passkeys are the ones that you may be using on your mobile device, for example, when you access and at some point as start to move away from, and then from then on, you probably use a biometric to authenticate into a system. I want to talk a little bit more about device-bound passkeys. They're the same with the underlying implementation. They're quite a bit different. The device-bound passkeys mean exactly as it sounds. So you bind that passkey to that actual device. With those two distinctions, they actually align better with two different groups. So I would say device-bound passkeys are great for your workflow. For compliance, CJIS, other for criminal justice information, for example, so FBI. So it can help you to tie to corporate devices. There's strong audit capability, and it is preferred by IT for proliferation of keys. So in other words, sync passkeys are the exact right ease of use. The passkeys sync to other devices via cloud service. Me to our solution, and I'm going to talk a little bit about our solution without being too pitchy, but we have our Crescendo line of products that comes to the card forward factor, bridge physical and logical access to a single card body. So some of the benefits are that is phishing resistant, again, based on FIDO2 technology, resistant to replay and credential stuffing, and also the other attacks that David mentioned a little bit earlier. Again, it increases your compliance posture. And you've kind of got this one credential to rule them all, as I like to say, a single card that can both access your physical spaces and your workstations. So again, stronger security posture of some sort, so a single card. So there's regulatory alignment, and I would say a big one, future proofing. So we work with a lot of customers who passkeys as an authentication method, but again, going back to what David. So this is a great time to think about what that authentication journey is going to look like for your customers. And so I want to talk about one I kind of alluded to a little bit earlier. So passkeys are built around a self-service model, generally speaking, but Microsoft very generously, I think, or at least very thankfully to us, released an API based off of their Graph API that will allow for, you do not want your end users that we call enterprise passkey managers. Here's what the card looks like. We also have keys. APM works with either of those. In fact, it will work with competing keys. That's a Crescendo key you see there, but we're agnostic, so it'll work with Fetian key, a UDA key, or whatever. So again, the story is around bridging. So it's really specific in this case to device bound and not synced. The benefits are bulk administration. So we're working with a couple of big companies currently that are about to implement this solution. And it's going to save them from a lot of headaches for administrators or some subset of that workflow. There's some lifecycle management. We also have a feature that will allow passkey unlock. So one other problem of passkeys is that, and it's really a feature, not a flaw, is that if you enter times it locks the device. However, that means that if you want to now unlock that device, there's no way to do that. So you have to do a complete device reset on that device. That might so we have come up with a challenge response mechanism. We'll to someone or get it to them somehow, will to generate an unlock code. So you can so that's about all that I have for you. Pass the mic.
So yeah, there's kind of a mixture of folks on this call. We have some end users. We have GHA who's our reseller partner. So depending on where you're coming from in this discussion, we can kind of help advise and consult depending on where you are in the journey. I'd like to kick things off by just throwing a couple of questions your way, David. We have a lot of customers that are government related or federal adjacent that have air-gapped networks. Obviously, we're talking Entra, we're moving to cloud. Does Microsoft have anything that would accommodate such an environment? Or alternatively, would those customers that need to have an air-gapped network, are they going to be staying on-prem? Is that what you would advise?
So we have what's called, or what was called Azure Stack. This is not an area that I typically work in, but Azure Stack would have Entra functionality. So basically, what it is a rack of servers that maintains Azure functionality, and so Entra would be part of that. So you can get the same functionality that you would with Entra, but you'd be more or less separated from.
Understood. That's great to know. I love the statement, complexity is the enemy of security. I think that's how you phrased it.
Yeah.
But you know,
I didn't invent it that way though.
I had not heard that before, but it makes complete sense. As our customers are going from on-prem to Entra, I think the best, at least authentication feature, is that passkeys and FIDO credentials are natively supported by Entra ID. As Eric Williams mentioned, HID Global being kind of the biggest manufacturer of physical access cards and door readers in the world. They have some great offerings for a one-card solution that includes both FIDO 2 and also your building access technology, so that you can have one card to do everything effectively. I'd like to just throw this out to the folks on the call at this point, but feel free to raise your hand or just jump in. Rich, I'm not sure if we have to unmute folks here, but would anybody like to provide some feedback in terms of where you are in this migration? Maybe what challenges you've come across?
And you may have to unmute yourself. And David does have one more question that somebody chatted to me in the Q&A too.
Perfect. Should we start with that one, Rich? Get the
Yeah,
conversation
let's
going?
start with that one. Let's everybody, they can formulate their questions. Let's start with that one because I think that's
Perfect.
one that also we get asked a lot. So David, the question, if you can't see it, is many organizations
No, I got
can't.
it.
Yeah, you got it. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, there are ways to increase the security of your environment, but keep in mind that you are operating two separate identity platforms. Really, they use different protocols, the way that they're structured is entirely different, and so it's kind of a balancing act where you're trying to keep both of these things secure, but you have to use different tools to do so. Specific guidance for customers operating securely in a hybrid AD and Entra ID setup without increasing risk. I think one of the things that's pretty important is to number one, leverage conditional access where you can. So for the users that are and actually one of the things that we're working on developing is the ability to apply conditional access policies to on-premises applications and so on. So even if you can't get all your users moved over to Entra, You may still be able to, or even if you can't get all your applications moved over like to Azure or up into the cloud somehow, if the users are moved up into the cloud, then you can apply these conditional access policies and apply things like MFA and risk-based MFA to their access to applications on-prem. In other words, it's a couple years ago we used Azure AD application proxy where you would authenticate to Azure AD and it would pass that authentication down to a web application that's in your own data center. That was great, except that it didn't support things like NTLM authentication, Kerberos authentication, and so on. With this new functionality, we're going to be able to support those protocols. But more than that, we're going to be able to apply conditional access policies so that your application that lives on-prem can benefit from the conditional access and MFA capabilities that exist in Entra while you work on moving those things, get them more secure. So that's one of the things that I see sometimes hindering customers from moving to the cloud, moving users to the cloud is, oh, I've got this application on-prem that they use, and if I move them to the cloud, they won't be able to get to it. That's one way of solving that problem. You give me a couple of minutes, I'll think of some other specifics, but I'll let things move on.
No, that's great. Thank you for that. You emphasize that hybrid it's part of the journey. It's not the end setup. Obviously, it's a hybrid environment is designed to be temporary with the objective of fully moving to Entra ID as we move forward. Our team has, I'd say at this point, we're seeing about 60% of our customers being hybrid. The other 40% are classic on-prem. But any guidance for folks, and Eric Williams, this could also go to you as well. But those that are hybrid, let's see, how should I phrase this? Any guidance on the most frictionless way to get them from hybrid to Entra ID? What's the ideal, once you're at hybrid, how do you close the loop from there and go fully cloud?
Yeah, I'm going to let, this is more David's realm because we don't do that sort of work. We do provide solutions, but we don't do migrations such as from on.
Sure, no worries. Yeah, so like I mentioned in the section that I was dealing with, there's a couple things that we want to do to kind of start to bridge that gap is start moving our devices, make sure that when new devices are brought online, they are native, so that you're managing them natively in the cloud. That means converting some of those GPOs into Intune profiles and security baselines. It's actually surprising. That's one of the things that I've heard many customers say, oh, I've got all these GPOs and Intune can't possibly do the same things that my GPOs do. I have yet to find a customer that cannot do the same thing with Intune that they can do right now with a GPO. That wasn't always the case. There was definitely a gap for a number of years, but now I argue that there's actually things that you can do in Intune that are not possible with GPOs, and so you get better management capabilities with Intune. So that's devices. With identities, and the other thing to keep in mind is with identities, when you're on premises, let me kind of back up. So if you think about like when you buy a brand new car, right? You buy a brand new car and you love that car. It's just absolutely beautiful. It's shiny. You don't want any scratches on it. Nobody's going to eat food in your car. Nobody's going to drink any drinks in your car. And then, after, a couple of weeks, somebody scratches your car and you're driving home and you're hungry. So you grab some food and you get a little bit of crumbs in the car. And after, 3 or 4 years, there's chicken nuggets crammed in the seats, and there's cookies. The crumbs are all over the floor, and it just deteriorates over time. And that's the way Active Directory has kind of been treated for a number of years for many organizations. It started out bright and shiny, everything's beautiful, nobody's going to ruin anything. And just over time, GPOs have been modified, and they, overlap each other. And there's who knows how many extraneous user accounts and dead devices in the directory. It just becomes, it hasn't been cared for the way it needs to be. That's one thing that definitely you can do to improve the security of your on-premises environment right now, right? Is do an audit of the devices, the user accounts, especially service accounts. Service accounts are gold for attackers. Number one, because the passwords almost never get changed, and number two, they have godlike power in most cases, right? If you need something that does your backup or that does some kind of device management, almost inevitably they will be assigned a domain admin credential or role, and that password will just never get changed because nobody wants to break it, right? So if you can identify those applications and those identities and shore up those aspects of your environment, get rid of the ones that are no longer needed, identify the devices that are stale and no longer being used. But again, especially the service accounts, if you can strengthen those now or move them potentially into the cloud where you can gain some better controls around them, that's one of the best things you can do right now to secure. There are plenty of audit tools that you can use for securing Active Directory as well, and many of them are free. Not everything is, but many of them are free, and you can leverage those to get a sense for what's going on in your environment and what needs to be strengthened. So those are a couple things to think about. I hope they're helpful, but feel free to put more stuff in the Q&A. For the one question about many organizations can't fully retire AD right now. Think about why you can't retire AD. Is it a belief that something is being used in AD that you feel like you can't convert it over? Is it a budget thing, right? You have to move some applications to the cloud, and there's not budget to do that. Or is it just a training issue that maybe you're familiar with AD, you're not familiar with Entra, right? So there's different reasons why people get stuck in the on-premises world, and kind of address the root cause, whatever that cause might be. I've rambled enough.
No, that was great, and I wasn't trying to lead your answer, but you ended up kind of going to where I wanted you to go, which is as you're getting new devices incorporated, just kind of taking those straight to Entra. That's a great way to sort of expedite the process. Obviously, with Windows 10, being discontinued, plenty of organizations are adding new devices. Might as well go straight to Entra ID if you're in a hybrid scenario. I also loved what you said about kind of taking an internal audit. Identifying the applications and the identities, service accounts that are there but don't have much attention associated with them. That's certainly an area where, as organizations are starting to move to Entra ID, that's a great place to start. It's just, pop the hood, look at your domain, see where things are at, see what accounts you have that haven't had password changes in a while. All this stuff is great fodder to consider as we're moving this transition. So very
Yeah.
well said there, David.
Yeah, there's a question in the chat from another person named David. How long do organizations typically stay in hybrid before moving fully cloud? And obviously that's going to vary from organization to organization. The bigger the organization, some organizations that I've worked with, large government organizations, they may have thousands of applications that have to be tested and verified and make sure that they can be converted over into the cloud and things like that. And so obviously they're going to take a little bit longer. But the I would say that a large portion of Microsoft customers right now are in some sort of a hybrid state. The world is right now. We would like to see that that shift to where more customers are natively cloud. It's hard to say, what's typical for an organization to stay in hybrid, because there's so many things that factor into it, right? The amount of budget that an organization might have to drive the migration, the number of applications, like I mentioned, the skill level of the organization. Are they using a partner? Are they using somebody that can help them move things along? There's not really a one size fits all. But I have seen organizations move to the cloud very, very rapidly when a ransomware attack hits. So there have been organizations that have been stuck on-prem. We can't move to the cloud. We can't move to the cloud. They get hit by ransomware, and cloud is the only option. And so they move everything literally to the cloud, and that can be in a matter of weeks, right? And you're talking about thousands and thousands of machines and users and everything. It just gets rebuilt. Now, I'm not recommending that as a process, but I'm saying that many of the perceived obstacles that organizations throw up and say, this is the reason why we can't move to the cloud, they are just perceived, right? Because when push comes to shove and they have no other option, they're able to move. So look very closely at those obstacles and see, are these just cultural? Are they, the comfort level of the individual that runs the application or that manages the application? Or is it a real technical blocker? And once you've answered that question, then maybe you can make better decisions on whether.
Yeah, well said. Sometimes it does take an attack or a breach to expedite the increase of your security. And it's unfortunate, but we'll oftentimes see end users that have had a breach and all of a sudden it's top priority to implement multi-factor authentication or go from on-prem to Entra. One of the great kind of aspects of HID Global and what HID offers that most other authentication organizations don't is the ability to manage credentials for all of your end users. Let's say you have 1,500 end users, you're going from on-prem or hybrid to Entra ID, and you need to get FIDO either cards or keys in the hands of your end users. The classic way to register a FIDO credential to an Entra ID account is for the end user to do it via self-service, set up their PIN, etc. That can be cumbersome on organizations to have, or rather trust your end users, educate them to register their own credentials. So HID does have a few different multi-factor authentication management solutions, but it's one thing to consider in terms of why you would want to work with HID Global, is the ability to, from an administrator perspective, to issue out those passkeys, those FIDO cards to all of your end users. Once the end user has the card in their hand, it's already enrolled to their Entra account, and at that point they have the ability to change their pin or create their own FIDO pin. So HIDs, their solution kind of for FIDO supports that workflow going from no credential or a username password credential to a FIDO credential into Entra ID pretty easily and seamlessly. If that's something that's on your mind, or as an organization, you are in this position where you are moving to Entra and you need passkeys or multi-factor FIDO credentials, what have you, please contact GHA, your GHA rep. They can get in contact with us. And while HID provides the solutions, TX Systems does do this kind of consultative approach where we'll take you from square one. We'll whiteboard out the path forward and kind of help everything get implemented appropriately. And back to David's point, this is not a one size fits all approach. Every organization is going to handle going from on-prem to Entra differently. So feel free to rely on us and GHA as you start to make this transition. We're happy to help wherever possible. So we have about 5 minutes left. Are there any other questions, comments? Eric Williams, anything else you'd like to add from the HID perspective?
No, I think we cover a lot. Kind of maybe building up on what you said a moment ago, it's like your passwordless. FIDO 2 is still a fairly nascent technology as compared to PKI, for example, which has been around for several decades. Tools and maybe just the maturity of the protocol is not, the FIDO alliances, that new features are added, large blob support, enterprise will allow, we rely on partners, technology partners such as Microsoft to, try a little bit more. So, I would just say, now it's a good time. Things are, about going in that direction. I know I'm not talking to, first of all, going to Microsoft Entra profile directly. But we work very closely.
Yeah, to add one thing on top of that, Eric, I'm looking at some of the names here of the folks that joined, and I see a couple of customers that are currently using smart cards and PKI for their on-prem domain. I think it's worth mentioning that HID's newer Crescendo cards, the Crescendo 4000, the Crescendo C2300, these cards have both the ability to issue and hold certificates as well as FIDO 2. So if you are using PKI and certificate-based authentication for on-prem Active Directory now, you can leverage one of these Crescendo cards that also has FIDO so that you can support FIDO 2 as you migrate into Entra ID.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. That's a good point. And I since you brought up our credential management system that on this session.
Well, I would sincerely like to thank everybody for joining today. I want to start kind of doing some more of these things that are a little bit more interactive as opposed to, your typical slide deck presentation. So let's keep this dialogue going. If there's anything you need, you can contact any of us. Start with your GHA rep. They'll know how to get in touch with us. And we look forward to supporting anybody who is here on this journey, moving from on-prem to Entra ID. David, thank you very much for joining us as well. Your insight is very much appreciated.
Enjoying. Thank you.
All right,
Thank you.
everybody. Have a great
Thanks, everyone.
afternoon.